technology is not inherently safe. That the concept of cybersecurity, while important, isn't necessarily baked into the original design. So often it's sold as an add-on.
Yes.
Welcome, and thank you for joining the Reboot Something podcast by Trilogy Innovations. My name's Chad Jeffries. I'm your host, and with me we have Randy Cottle. Everybody's probably seen his face from now.
This ain't my first rodeo,
right?
For sure.
But he's the vice president and chief operations officer for Trilogy. So we're happy to be joined by Jody Ogle today. And Jody, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day today. So Jody is the cybersecurity advisor for the state of West Virginia. So he's West Virginia state coordinator and working for CISA, or the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, a little bit about his background, and just kind of having an open conversation today. So
yeah, we're rebooting cybersecurity
we're
today.
Cybersecurity,
yes,
that's right.
Correct.
And who better to do so than with Jody? So. Awesome.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, Jody, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at CISA?
Yeah, appreciate it. And thanks for the platform here. Awareness is one of our goals, to shine a spotlight on cybersecurity. So a little bit about the agency. The agency is the newest federal agency, and currently we're the smallest federal agency as far as I know. We're the newest agency within the newest department of federal government. So it was in the news recently. The Homeland Security just turned 20 years old. It was developed as a result of the unfortunate attacks in 9/11, and then CISA was formed in 2018 as a result of some legislation to put a greater emphasis on cybersecurity and infrastructure security. So, newest agency, newest department in federal government with a really big responsibility, really important mission. So. My position, like you said, I'm the state coordinator, cybersecurity state coordinator. There's a little bit of nuance in a state coordinator and a cybersecurity advisor. Cybersecurity advisors predated CISA, and they were usually a headquarters function. But as the agency has grown, we now have a regional construct. It's a lot like FEMA, and then we have field forces deployed within those regions. And my position, I believe it was the National Defense Appropriation Act of 2018 established my position, and the intent was that we would be in the general vicinity of a state capital, usually 50 miles. And while normal cybersecurity advisors focus on all 16 sectors of critical infrastructure, I do as well, but my particular focus is on the state government. To be that advisor to a state CISO, a state CIO, the governor's staff, the electoral process in West Virginia, it's the Secretary of State, to be that cybersecurity advisor to them. And then additionally assist those other owners, operators of critical infrastructure. And we try to operate at the C-suite because we're looking at policy, governance, strategy. Not always possible. Some entities don't have that, right? They're small.
Right.
All they have is one guy who manages the network. He might also mow the grass.
Yeah, well, that's true. Especially at the state level.
I've encountered that, but our goal is to be a resource, be an asset, and help anyone that would be within those 16 sectors or within government establish cybersecurity resilience. So that's a little bit about my job. It's what I do. And
it's definitely desperately needed, especially with all the different attacks and stuff that's happening nowadays. Obviously, like you said, after 9/11, there was an emphasis put on this, but it continues to grow as technology advances. We're needing this more and more. And a lot of times it was like security is more of an add-on later on, but now there needs to be more of a focus and shifting that left as part of the actual development. So
yeah, Randy, you're right. And just before the podcast, we were talking. Director Easterly she's our director, Director Jen Easterly.
Okay.
In February, she gave a speech at Carnegie Mellon University, and it was good fortune to attend that. And she talked about security safe software. and what that means. And, you know, as you mentioned, security is sometimes an afterthought or an add-on, or it's something that's sold separately. I was once a developer myself. It was been more than 20 years ago, but
Same.
But then, you know, security, we thought about it, but not in the way that we do now. You know, you might encrypt data in transit or something of that sort, but you didn't. You know, it wasn't what it is today. But the point of her speech, and you know, would not try to put words in her mouth, but it was to get developers and these producers of technology to think about security on the front end, bake it into the process. And she used a really good analogy. It's that you know, the automotive industry does that, right?
Right.
In
Absolutely.
the automotive industry, there's airbags, there's seat belts, there's anti-lock brakes, and there's all these things safety checks. There's the radar systems that measure your distance from the vehicle in front of you. And all those things to make that driver and the occupant of that vehicle safe. But it's lesser the case in technology, right? So the burden, when there's a breach or when there's something bad happens, when somebody's having a bad day with technology, and when the litigation, you know, when it goes to litigation, the person who purchased that technology or who's employing it for whatever business function they have, they're the ones held accountable.
Right.
And not to say that shouldn't be the case, but there should be. Her point is that her goal would be to get developers to think about that on the front end, bake it into the process.
Being proactive rather than reactive to.
You might hear me say the word resilience a lot because that's what CISA focuses on. It's that left of boom, that pre-boom, as much as you can on the front end will certainly reduce the effect on the back end.
Well, and you mentioned the vehicle industry, so a lot of that was insurance claims and that kind of stuff that kind of pushed that. And I can tell you, our insurance for cybersecurity and when we do software development has increased quite a bit. So that's also pushing us as developers to say, hey, no, we need to be making sure we're locking this down ahead of time, because if not, on the back end, it's cost me a fortune. So let's definitely get that focus shifted where it needs to be.
Right. And the barrier to entrance is becoming more challenging to surpass, right? The bar is higher. One of the things as advisors we talk about, you know, insurance is just transference of risk.
Right.
But insurances are paying out an exorbitant amount of money.
Right. Exactly.
Particularly, you know, we'll probably talk about ransomware in a little bit because it's such a prominent trend right now, but it's been more and more challenging to purchase insurance, and the insurance is paying less and less. So it's becoming a real challenge.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I've lived it firsthand for sure. And to your point, you know, as developers before, it was like, hey, we just need to get this code to work to get it done. And then so you would develop it, and then you throw it over the fence to operations, and you're like, here, it works on my computer, you guys get it deployed. Right. And there was always this back and forth about operations and development because they're like, well, we can't get it to work, and the developers are saying that worked fine on my end. And then all the way at the end, then you have the security guys like, hey, is this even secure or anything? They're like, oh, be quiet. We're just trying to get this to work. And, and then once operations gets pushed out to production, then they're like, oh, we can't worry about that now because it's up and running. We just got to keep it going. Right. So that's the whole reason behind the DevSecOps, right? It's a marrying together of the three different parts of the development process to make sure that you're working and collaborating together instead of being siloed through each section.
Right. So Jody, let me ask you, how does, if you could just talk about the collaboration a little bit, you know, with, you know, between CISA, other government agencies, businesses in the private sector. Can you kind of talk about the, you know, importance of collaboration between, you know, these entities? And
yeah, sure. So a rising tide raises all ships, right?
Yes.
And that's what collaboration is. It's the ability to share information across all the parties that need it. We do a lot of information sharing in CISA. There's a multitude of ways we do it. One of the way I'll talk about in a second is I'll use the acronym JCDC. That's an initiative for, I'll talk about it now. That's an initiative for CISA to collaborate with larger companies for that, for the purpose of information sharing, right? So that the rising tide raises all ships, and that's at a high level. at the ground level, at the where the rubber meets the road, and that's often where you'll see a cybersecurity advisor. And we have other types of advisors I'd like to talk about in a minute, other types of security advisors. But where the rubber meets the road, sharing of information is critical.
Right.
The state coordinator role is kind of new. There are not that many of us, but ultimately there will be one in every state capital once we're all hired. But one of the things that I do as a state coordinator is, so you take local government, resource poor.
Yeah.
Local government's resource poor everywhere you go. Everywhere you go.
Every state. Yeah.
Every state. In New York City, local government is resource poor. It just happens. But different entities sometimes have different resources, right? So as the coordinator, one of the ways that I have shaped my role is that I make sure that information is shared across entities at the lowest level.
Yeah.
The information about risk and vulnerabilities and threats, certainly. And we have to do it at the appropriate classification level, but there's a lot out there that's unclassified.
Yes.
So you share that at the local level, but one small city might have a resource, another small city might not, and then you can create that collaboration. And again, you're getting the best bang for the buck.
Kind of like reusing software.
Absolutely, it's code reuse.
Right,
Modular software was something I spoke about 20 years ago.
Object-oriented
modular code,
reuse.
object-oriented coding. But the same. So we do it across all levels. So CISA, we hope to be that driving force across all levels, from the lowest level of government or the smallest company that is one or two people to Fortune 500 and larger. We try to facilitate that sharing. We do it with other federal agencies. We attend meetings at fusion centers and such, where we'll talk with FEMA and the Coast Guard. Those are other DHS entities, but we talk regularly with the FBI and HSI and the Secret Service and then the state police and all those different entities that matter, that help make us more holistically safe.
Yeah.
Well, and you'd mentioned, working with other like federal contractors and stuff. I know there's been a big push, especially here recently, doing software factories, right? I know the Accenture, the Mantex, Leidos, all these really big federal contractors are doing this, and trying to get this stuff done in a CI/CD pipeline. So have you worked with some of those entities? Because if not, they'll be at Tech on June 20th. So maybe we can get you introduced with some of those companies. And
yeah, sure. I have, and I'll be cautious to name the people I've worked with and I've not worked with.
Okay,
so,
that's probably a good idea.
So we're here in Morgantown, and just south of us is a tech sector, right?
Yes,
and some of those companies you just named have headquarters there, and I've worked with them. Sometimes it's just general advice. Hey, what do you think? And we can do that. Sometimes it's a delivery of services. We offer assessments. My assessments, the ones that I deliver, are of a more strategic nature, right? So I can help them look at their cybersecurity posture and help them assess their resilience. One of the assessments we do is a cyber resilience review. It looks at 10 domains of cybersecurity from a policy and governance and practice level, but then it gives them a maturity measure. How mature are they on a scale of 0 to 5? And yes, some of the companies that you named, some of them are headquartered here, not headquartered, but they have a presence. They have a presence here in West Virginia, and I've worked with them. But across the country, cybersecurity advisors are doing the same. So we're going to have our first ever summit next week of all the cybersecurity advisors, and I think we're up to like 85 right now. Now that's a small amount when you think of the amount of work to be done.
Right.
But certainly we do.
Well, and you hit on something else. So there's different like CMMC, there's ISO certifications. I don't know, maybe there'll be CISA certifications in the future as part of these contract vehicles. Say, well, are you CISA certified? And who knows what could happen.
Could be.
Because there is a growing need for that. I know with ISO and of course CMMC, you get a lot of that, but cybersecurity being what the role that it plays not only today but in the future, I mean, it's just growing and growing. I could definitely see something like that happening.
Right.
A lot of our assessments map to some of those standards that you were just discussing, particularly NIST.
Right, NIST.
And we do help. There's not one size fits all. So when particularly when I do an assessment, a lot of times we'll do them in twos or in tandems. Of course, our assessment will map to a standard, but then we help them, you mentioned those different standards and possibly a certification. We help them create a strategy to get to get to the point that they need to be, or as best they can,
right,
as best as the resources will allow them to be.
Oh yeah. Well, and you might be able to talk to this, working with small businesses, large businesses, and even government agencies. Have you seen that that's kind of where your all's bread and butter is, developing strategies and leveraging that?
I would say it differs by cybersecurity advisor, but yes, I would say that's one thing that's something I try to do. We were talking just before the podcast that I really like strategy. It's something I'm interested in. It's something I've studied extensively. And yes, so, the goal of CISA is to have enduring relationships. We're not a one and done. We're not going to, we could. I mean, and sometimes it is the case. We'll come assess you. You're like, oh, thanks for the report.
Right.
And then we walk away, you throw it away. And that happens. We know that. We know that. Right. We know that happens. But the goal is to have that enduring relationship where it's like, okay, hey, look, we assessed you a year ago. Here are the things that you thought, or we thought collectively that might be good for you to focus on, low-hanging fruit. Okay, that's happened. Now, where are you? As a result of this assessment, were you able to make any type of capital investments, any resource investments? Were you able to do anything, or did you do that stuff? So we can help them. So we can help them mature and grow. That can be in the form of a plan. We can help them write a cybersecurity plan. We can help them develop a strategy. And bear in mind, a strategy is different for Leidos than it is for mom and pop.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Right? It's different. It looks
for
different.
Trilogy versus Leidos. And again,
all
well, that's good that you take time to
and
assess that, right?
Yeah.
And it's not this one size fits all strategy.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And our assessments are templated. We follow a plan. We follow we follow the process. But what we do with the results of that. We help the stakeholders best we can. We refer to people as stakeholders, not customers, because we're not charging. Everything we do is no cost. I won't say free. Your tax dollars paid for us.
Right. Yeah.
But everything that we do is no additional cost. And but it does look a little bit different for everybody.
Well, and especially I know there's banking industries and other things, but I think that people are okay with our tax dollars getting spent on this because in general, I know that the federal government's finally stepping in to crack down on not only these robocalls, but these text messages that we're getting, right?
Yeah.
Where people are phishing to get your, bank account information, your personal information. I got a link this morning that my Netflix account was hacked.
Same. Yep.
And, but of course it's like Netflix.ao and all this weird text, right? But, some people that aren't in the industry or might be like, oh, what's wrong with my Netflix account? And immediately click it, and then you're getting sucked down a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah. And ransomware, that's one of the popular vectors of ransomware. We were talking about it. I got the Leidos report in front of me here. And just in ICS systems in 2022, ransomware was up 87%.
Oh, my.
ICS, can you clarify for?
Industrial control systems.
Okay. Industrial.
Where information technology converges with operational technology.
Okay. Gotcha.
So control systems for water, gas, bridges, your hard infrastructure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, actually, to that point, because that's what happened in North Carolina with the gas, right? And then much like what's happening in the banking system where everybody made a run because they're like, oh, we don't have any money. They were worried that they weren't going to have gas. So there was like 12-hour line of people just going to the gas, and then they had a shortage. And that's what happens with our system is if there's a scare that we're having a supply problem, everybody rushes out. Just like COVID, you could not get toilet paper anywhere whenever COVID happened because they made that rush. So, with the system, that's why, again, why cybersecurity is so important, that we're monitoring these type of things. In fact, we actually sponsored the capstone project for WVU because they were using drones and other things, but they're also looking at the energy sector to see, what kind of attacks that might happen to make sure, because whenever you talk about electricity, even broadband, or the gas industry, I mean, these are major things that could wipe out and cause panic all over, right? So if you're not investing in this, you need to definitely
Right.
make sure that we are having that investment. And again, that's why CISA is so important, I think.
One of the things we do try to do is to your point is the investment, to go back to that. And that's why I say we like to speak to the C-suite or a decision maker. It's different across all organizations, sometimes an elected official, but we try to get to the decision maker because to help them understand that cybersecurity is important. They don't doubt it. No one doubts it.
Right.
But sometimes it takes an assessment to illustrate the gravity of the situation, or it takes a report like sharing any number of these reputable cybersecurity related reports. They're all out there in the public domain, but just to see the gravity of the situation. You don't have to have a top secret security clearance to understand that there's a threat. There are vulnerabilities everywhere, but the threat is real.
Yeah. So, are there any unique cybersecurity threats, or I guess any specific issues that are to West Virginia, or maybe just our nation in general, when it comes to cybersecurity? And how is CISA addressing those issues?
Well, that's a good question.
If not West Virginia specifically,
you may have stumped me. So.
Well, you mentioned ransomware.
Yeah, ransomware is tremendous. And I'm looking at another statistic right here. I'm cheating a little bit. I got some numbers in front of me, but
we all have
of all the ransomware globally in 2022. Now, this is, again, I'm going to reference the Dragos report because I was reading it last night. But 40% of all ransomware was in North America.
40%.
So, and you look at Asia is 18%. Now this is by continent. Europe was second at 32%, but those are resource-rich continents, right?
Yes.
And
that's true.
Africa is 1%. Now they're resource-rich in different ways, but we're resource-rich. We're a target. I don't know who has the world's largest economy right now. I think it's still the United States, but 40% is targeted towards North America.
Tells us something, right?
It tells us something, right?
Yeah.
Now, in West Virginia is a little bit unique, so within the region 3, West Virginia, I'm the furthest away from our regional headquarters, which is Philadelphia. Sometimes I joke and say that it's New Zealand because it takes me forever to get anywhere, right? Those that are not familiar with our terrain need to come and check it out. Excuse me. West Virginia is one of those states that has less resources than others.
Yes.
And Randy, I know that's something that's really important to you.
Oh, absolutely.
And some of your initiatives. So what's critical in West Virginia might look different than what's critical somewhere else, right? One of the priorities that CISA is placing this calendar year is on water. And it's just a matter of coincidence. Since I've been with CISA, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of water companies, water authorities, on both the distribution, the wastewater, and then the business function in the middle, because they have to make money, right? They have to charge someone.
Right.
I've done a good amount of work with water, and a water authority in West Virginia that services 3,000 people on a national scale. That's pretty small. And it doesn't compare to the water system that would provide water to Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. There's multiples there, but to that body of people, to that rural county, it's very, very important.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Very important. You take a county like Putnam County, right? It's probably one of the more affluent counties in West Virginia. But not a tremendously large population, not that many water authorities, not that many water companies. But if you make that county sick, it's really important.
I mean, you look at Flint, Michigan, right?
It's really important.
Right.
Yeah, and what happened there. So,
but one of the things that is in Putnam County is Toyota.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of a big deal, right?
Absolutely.
It's a big manufacturing plant. It's, a lot of jobs.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and they're doing the bottling plant here in Morgantown too. So that's going to have some serious impacts. I think it's is it the electric company? Who owns the actual dam here for Cheat Lake?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't.
I think it is the electric company. But
is it Mon Power maybe?
Yeah, Mon Power. Yes,
okay.
Thank you. But you think about that, and then the control that has in this area. if there was certain attacks there. And I think that whenever people think cybersecurity, they immediately think of attacking on a computer
or
you're
just
getting
their
stuff on
data.
their phone, just
Yeah.
their data. But then whenever you start pulling in the infrastructure side,
Absolutely.
I mean, and the impacts that has, I think that is what gets people going, oh man, like
Right.
there is serious threats and
Right.
concerns here, because I mean, it can wipe out most of the state,
Right.
really.
It's like you take down a grid, then you
Yeah.
affect a lot more people than
Yeah,
just.
it's scary stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I was just going to say, and to your point of what we were talking earlier, last year's Tech we saw the federal funding that came into all the states around us, and we weren't even close. We were barely at $1 million or something, and all these other states are getting all these billions of dollars.
Right.
And even with our population, still, we need to be getting in those federal dollars and making sure that people are aware, especially whether it's cyber or the infrastructure side of the house. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
So just a couple of thoughts there. Federal dollars. So last year there was a grant that came to West Virginia. It's actually going to be over a period of 5 years. The first we just went through the first notice of funding. First of 5 notice of fundings, and it's intended for state and local government, because you go back to the resource poor. So this is cybersecurity specific funding. And what makes the grant nice is that 80% of it has to go to local government.
Yeah.
So I have a great relationship with the state CIO and the state CISO. Work with them very well, but they're the conduit of that money.
Yeah.
But then it's going to reach state and local government where it's really needed. I mean, it's really needed.
Yeah.
When you talk about, we have a federated election system here in West Virginia, where the counties, all elections are local, right? They're at the county level. And not to say that all that money will go towards elections, but it does go to local government, and that's great. That's a great first step, and it will be reoccurring over 5 years. There is this cost share that increases as it goes along with the local government's share will increase as it goes along, but that's one step, and that came out of one of the recent infrastructure bills that passed a while back. But,
Excellent.
But can I touch another point? So we're talking about all these things, right? We're talking about grids and convergence and all this thing, and that's a buzzword right now. It's a buzzword, and CISA is convergence. But we're the cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. A lot of people forget about the infrastructure. I don't know by portion of people, but there might be more people on the infrastructure side in CISA than there are to cyber. I don't know. I know that we're in a hiring frenzy.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we have cybersecurity advisors, which is what I am. We have protective security advisors. Now, the one in West Virginia is currently vacant, but it's been selected. That person focuses on the physical nature of security. And there is some overlap. When possible, we do joint ventures so that we're visiting a stakeholder and discussing both physical and the cyber, and that's great. And we also have communications coordinators, advisors. So you talk about your emergency communication networks, right? If there's West Virginia has a statewide interoperable radio network. I know this from my National Guard days. I spent a lot of time involved with this, and anytime there's a flood, this radio system, you can speak from War, West Virginia, to Jefferson County. It's amazing, to Weirton.
Wow.
It'll actually reach the steps of the U.S. Capitol. This radio system will. It's a microwave trunking system, but we have advisors for that purpose as well, to advise on emergency communications. And then we have chemical security inspectors. They're regulatory, but they're charged with keeping the chemicals, the chemical sector.
Yeah.
But we have field forces to address a lot of different things, and when we work in harmony, we can do a lot of good.
Can you give us some examples of what you've done in West Virginia, or maybe not you, but maybe CISA just in general? And is there like a success story that you could share with us in terms of either infrastructure or cyber?
So let's talk about some emergent incident response coordination. I'm not an incident responder in that I'm going to touch somebody's keyboard. That's not what I do. But we do some response coordination. I made a joke earlier that sometimes the IT guy mows the grass, and that's because that's based in
A real world
this is a
situation.
real world story that I have.
Right.
I won't name the entity, but it was local government. So
Yeah.
I won't name them, or I won't even name what type of government entity they were. But they were. So Randy, before we started, I mentioned of the dozens and dozens of incidents that I'm aware of in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And I covered Western Pennsylvania for a long time too, and it's true for them as well. Dozens and dozens, and I'm coming up on 2 years with CISA. Only 2 have not been ransomware.
Oh, wow.
Those are the ones that have been reported to me. Now, there's many, many, many more, but those are the ones that I'm aware of. Only 2 have not been ransomware. One was a remote access Trojan. It was a local government entity, and I knew. From my role, I spent a lot of years in the National. Still am in the National Guard, but I spent about 18 years full time for the National Guard, and I knew an individual from that government entity, and he called me and he said, "Hey, I think we have a problem," but through the coordination phase, we were able to get one. They were covered by the state cyber insurance, so that was great, right? They didn't know that. They had no idea.
Right.
They had no idea that in West Virginia, as a local government entity, they were bound by law to report to the state CISO. So helped them with that, helped them discover that they have insurance, helped them get that contracted company to come in and help mitigate that problem. But also the MSISAC stepped in and helped them with mitigation. So this is a very resource poor government entity. And I joked about mowing the grass. It was a gentleman, and it was their IT guy, but when one of the times we're trying to get a hold of them, we couldn't because they were mowing the grass.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that's not their fault.
Right.
That's not their fault. It's just a matter of resources. It's just the nature of the beast. But the good news story is that there was no harm done, other than a little bit of time, some pain. They got help from both the insurance and from the MSISAC, and it was a good test of the state coordinator role that I'm in to be able to bring that together. So that's a success story.
Well, I think it's important to make sure that folks know that they have basically you as a resource, because whenever stuff happens like this, they're like, what do I do? Where do I go? And a lot of people, this is their first time. They kind of freak out. But knowing that they basically have you as a resource to be able to come to say, what are my steps? Because they might not have that plan. And I know we talked earlier about what is the strategic plan. But a lot of that, especially if you're a smaller business, you're not thinking, well, I'm going to get hacked, or I'm working for this agency.
You're thinking about all the other things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Luckily, most of the people that work for us have been in the government for many years. So we've been really good about locking down everything that we do to try to eliminate a lot of this noise that comes in. But still, it's an ever-evolving thing to where you're constantly every year doing refreshes, whether it's technology or things to combat that.
That's a perfect segue. So let's get a little more technical. So can you talk to us about some of the emerging technologies that either CISA is using, or maybe just technologies that could, assist in
cyber attacks?
In cyber attacks, so is there anything like emerging or brand new?
Let's say, as far as emerging, I don't know that I have an answer as for what we're employing on emerging. I am on the field operations side, not in the threat hunting vulnerability management side.
Right. Okay.
So most of what I do is more of a human. Let's interact. So I would stop short of naming whatever CISA is going to employ.
That's fair.
Artificial intelligence is going to change the game,
Yeah.
right? In machine learning, and I'm not
saying
CISA is doing that, but it is going to change the game. So I'm sorry. This is a question that probably I'm not the best,
That's okay.
best suited to answer.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine too. So
I know that we do work with law enforcement, and law enforcement does have different partners, and there's ways in which we're able to gather information and share about different threats and different vulnerabilities, and I'm able to do victim notifications because of some of the technologies employed by some of our other government partners. So, and we've been able to head off ransomware a few times, because I'm not going to speak of the technology because I know what it is and I know who owns it, but it's employed by another federal partner. And a success story there, and I know I'm not answering your question. I just pivoted. But we have on several occasions we call them victim notifications, and we do a multitude of them now. There's a lot on our plate as advisors. But some of the things are real time. We're like, hey, you need to stop what you're doing because there's an actor in your network.
Yes.
And here's what they're going to do. And we've had a good amount of success because then they look and they're like, holy smokes, it is there.
Oh, yeah.
And they're able to get them out.
Yeah. Are you working with other small businesses or other federal contractors to maybe have that as a service where they are actively trying to help monitor those type of things?
So we do offer that technology in particular, no, but CISA does offer it no cost vulnerabilities monitoring of your network. So we call it cyber hygiene. I can certainly provide more detailed information. It's on our website, but we scan for vulnerabilities. So you can sign up. Sign you up. Will you give us your IP range? We'll scan you.
Oh wow.
And
so we can all just
external facing IPs, and we'll scan you and we'll give you a vulnerability report. I think it's weekly. I don't want to say 100%, but I think it's weekly. You'll get a report of your known vulnerabilities, and then what CISA does is we publish a known exploited vulnerability list. So it's one thing to know what your vulnerabilities are, right? It's another thing to prioritize those vulnerabilities.
Right.
So, and that's difficult for some folks, based off of skill, training, resources. So we publish it, the ones that we have known to be exploited. That way that can help them prioritize. And that's another no-cost service that we offer.
Yeah. And to your point back with technology, so there has been a shift where, let's say government agencies had their own data centers and stuff, but then you're actually deploying staff to make sure that it's constantly patched, scanning for vulnerabilities, making sure it's basically on the latest and greatest, so you don't have these bad actors coming in, targeting you and getting into your system. So there has been a push to the cloud, for example, which, again, a cloud is just another data center that they're managing.
It's a data center you don't own, right?
Yeah, it's a data center that you don't own. You invested all that money into your own computers. Now you're paying for somebody else's, right? But then now you can yell at them like, hey, well, why aren't this patched, right? But, with the shift to the cloud and even containerization to where you're constantly spinning up the latest and greatest, right? So that way you're not opening yourself up to some of this. That's kind of been the shift. And I know there's been a lot of investments. I believe that Google had bought Mandiant after the SolarWinds attacks. So, even these major cloud providers are investing very heavily into cybersecurity. And that's why like government agents like CISA can kind of come in and see what they're doing. But then because you have to get ATO to be able to make sure that you're running safely in the cloud and that everything is locked down and secure, which is authorization to operate, basically.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I know there has been just a major push for that, and again, it's no longer us having to be deployed out there making sure that hey, is rail patched or
and the cloud's great. We talked about insurance transferring risk earlier, and the cloud is another way to transfer risk. It is, but it's great, and it helps those that are on the lower end of the resource spectrum.
Just focus on spinning up one little container.
Exactly. The one thing, though, as the customer or the consumer of that cloud service that's important is to read the contract, to understand what you're getting, right?
Absolutely.
And not everyone understands contract law. I don't claim to understand it either, but make sure you know what you're dependent upon. And that steers me to another point. One of the things we do as cybersecurity advisors is we help people assess their external dependencies and the management of those external dependencies. External dependencies don't necessarily mean a cloud service. It doesn't necessarily mean a software as a service. It could be the power coming into your building.
Yeah.
That's an external dependency. You're
yeah.
dependent on your power company. You're dependent on your water company. You're dependent on your public servants like your EMS, your fire, your rescue. You're dependent on those.
Natural gas.
Natural gas.
Yeah.
But certainly you're dependent on technologies. Anything you pay a subscription for, that's a dependency. And if it's outside your immediate span of control, then pay attention to it.
Oh yeah.
Pay attention to it. No. Do you know how to get a hold of them? If when you're having a bad day, do you know who to call?
Yeah.
And that's one of the first steps of incident response, disaster recovery, whatever you call your plan.
Right.
Incident management, whatever you want to call it. Who do you call?
Right.
But to your point, the cloud has simplified it for people in a very positive way. I believe that it's done it in a very positive way.
Yeah.
Just the advice I would give is make sure you know what you're buying.
Right.
Right.
And don't leave it running over the weekend. You might be surprised at your bill at the end.
Right.
Of the month. You know, shut down these services.
If you're a government entity, are you buying a reputable government cloud provider?
Right.
Are you going? You got to look into that because they configure their security settings differently. For their customer.
Well, and that's why Google has kind of been playing catch up a little bit. They needed to be FedRAMP certified high, right? So AWS was out there, Azure, and Google was slower to get theirs, but they're catching up and making good headway. But to your point, if you don't have something like that and know that it's already locked down, then you're out of the market, unfortunately. Yeah.
So does CISA do any work for, I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit here, but does CISA do any work with universities, educational institutions to maybe get out ahead of it? You mentioned getting out in the front of it. And I noticed a recent blog article too with CISA working with the Girl Scouts of America, I believe, and trying to get more women
I saw that too
into cybersecurity.
So women in cyber, there is a big focus there, and they're underrepresented in the profession. They really are.
In IT,
agreed. Yeah.
Just in IT in general. Yeah. I went to Marshall and I started a program.
Wait, he went to Marshall?
I am in enemy territory right now. I'm aware of that.
I'll cover up the mug.
Not to interrupt.
We were just down at Marshall recruiting about a week and a half ago.
At Marshall. So.
I'm an adjunct there too. So
nice. Okay.
They do a good job with their cybersecurity program. They really do. But the program I graduated from 20-some years ago was called Integrated Science and Technology. It doesn't exist anymore. And my emphasis was software engineering. But I think we started with 60 people, and I can remember 2 or 3 women in our course.
In the course.
In our course, and 5 of us finished, and they didn't. And I don't really know why that is. It certainly wasn't a lack of intelligence, but our industry does not have a lot of women present, and I think it's underrepresented. So I work with a couple really great ladies in Region 3, but I think that pivot towards the Girl Scouts is probably a good move.
Yeah.
It is a good move. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a good move. So, the awareness of technology and what it means for society at a young age is great.
Absolutely.
My son does code.org.
Oh, really?
And I make him. So,
Well, and if my wife has taught me anything, she's really good at pointing out problems of things that I'm doing. So, but seriously, we're trying. I think that what we're trying to do is the K through 12. Make sure that they understand it because, as you're going through school, whenever these younger kids, they're like, I want to be a fireman, I want to, be a policeman, and all that stuff. But you don't say, I want to be a cybersecurity specialist.
Right, you don't hear
because you don't know about it.
They're
or
great,
what is it?
They're great paying professionals.
Absolutely.
Yes, they are.
Here in the state.
Here in the state, right?
Exactly.
Here in the state, and especially with remote work, it's more and more an opportunity. CISA has a lot of remote, plug for my agency. We have a lot of remote jobs. It's great.
Yeah.
Right.
I work from my house. I see my kids get off the bus. I mean, there's a lot of positives to even working remote. But West Virginia has opportunities. But to answer your question, yes, we do.
Yeah.
We do work with universities. We're of course the big 2. Obviously there's the big 2.
Yeah.
Right, So we do work with them. I've worked with a number of other smaller colleges in the state. we do a lot of awareness with K through 12,
Yeah.
Different school boards and whatnot. And it just as a matter of coincidence, I mentioned earlier, I covered Western PA. I did a lot in Western PA with their intermediary units last year.
Right.
A lot of we deliver workshops. We can teach incident management. We can teach cyber resilience. Just guided discussions. We'll do those. We offer that as a service for anybody that wants it. So education is particularly in Western Pennsylvania. They picked up on that and they ran with it. In West Virginia is too. It's pure coincidence, but I did more in Pennsylvania. But as far as the colleges go, I received permission from CISA. I'm on a board at Marshall.
Yeah.
So for one of their
And they have the Cybersecurity Institute now,
Right, I'm on
as
that
well. I
board.
went and toured that facility. It's really nice.
Where's that?
At Marshall.
Oh, that's at
University.
Marshall.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. So they have the Cybersecurity Institute.
Yeah.
Whenever I was in the MIS program at WVU, I stayed on an extra semester because they, back in like 2004, to where they were adding a cybersecurity class. Right now it's, you can actually major in cybersecurity.
The whole major. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Right, yeah.
So and
From the
that,
computer science and from
Yeah.
the
and that's what
other
18
college.
years ago, right? So you've seen the shift now that's actually happening. So sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important, and both I've looked at the cybersecurity programs from both WVU and Marshall, and they're fantastic.
Yeah. Oh,
They're
yeah.
fantastic. I did a lot of work with the National Guard. I was on that. It was a workforce development, and I still attend the meetings. That workforce development meeting, it happens in Fairmont. I'm drawing a blank on the what it's called, but a lot of representatives from academia are there. And I've attended as CISA, and I attended previously. I used to be the CIO for the West Virginia National Guard, so I attended in that role as well.
Yeah.
But academia in this state is very proactive, and the soliciting valuable feedback and what is important to the workforce, which is obviously you can provide that feedback.
Exactly.
Right.
And then how do they target their curriculum to get to it?
So that's part of what we're doing with Tech Yeah. And again, Jody will be there speaking as part of the government C-level panel, which is awesome. We're really happy to have him there.
Great, yeah.
And but that's kind of what we're trying to do is bring together industry, right? So it's federal contractors, universities, students to kind of see like this is the ever-changing side of technology, especially here in the state. I know we do tourism and coal, and we are an energy state, but we're also a growing technology state.
Oh, yeah.
And that was part of it, is to let people know. Because honestly, when I started in the MIS program, I started out in computer science and engineering, and I'm like, this ain't quite for me. And I always wanted to own my own business, so I went to the business school and I said, what's the highest ranking salary coming out? And they said MIS, and I was like, what's MIS? So when I went in the program, I didn't know what exactly it was or what it did. And then I'm like, well, what can I do with my degree after this? Like, do I go do web development? But that's the thing. It lets you do so many different things. I know we're having the director of NASA is actually going to be at Tech Yet on the same panel with you. He went through the MIS program, right? So, and now with the cybersecurity program, it's more about educating people, letting them know what career paths there is if you do get a cybersecurity degree or an MIS degree, and then that you don't actually have to leave the state.
Exactly.
And that's what we're trying to do is keep the people here.
Right. One of the challenges in West Virginia for years was terrain, right?
Yes.
One of the reasons we don't have what other states have, like let's say North Carolina, is we have mountainous terrain.
Right.
It takes flat space to build big things.
Right.
And we don't have that, but with technology, that's not the case. Technology is a game changer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Well, and like you said, remote. So you could live out in California and have to have a $700,000 a year salary just to afford a 1,200 square foot apartment, or you can be in West Virginia and be able to work remote. But then again, all those tax dollars and stuff are staying here, and it's a much more beautiful place to live, and that's why we have our awesome tourism as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was listening to the radio on the way up here, and I forget which channel it was. I picked it up around Fairmont. So not Fairmont, Flatwoods. I picked it up somewhere around Flatwoods, but it said that West Virginia is now the second lowest cost of living state in the United States, next to North Dakota.
Oh, wow.
So
Didn't know that. Yeah.
I mean, I can't cite the survey. I don't know the source.
Yeah, right.
I don't even remember the radio channel.
Yeah, I love it. They're always saying
that's why I moved
scientists
back.
say, or this survey says we had 100 people surveyed, right?
Yeah, right.
But whether it's 100, whether it's a very accurate or scientifically done survey, it's still probably pretty close to true.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's just it. Again, we're trying to recruit more people here because, again, at the federal level, we actually lost representation because we had a lot of people leaving the state. And that's what we're trying to do. Again, keep our people here, show that there's great living. A lot of people want to come here and raise their kids. But then there's good paying jobs here, right? And you might have to go get an associate degree for 2 years. I know there's actually been a big push, especially with Google and other places where they're just trying to get people certifications.
Right.
Problem right now is, with GSA and some of these contract vehicles, high school education is enough, which I absolutely agree, especially the systems that we deal with. Now, if you go out and you get certified in some of these technologies, like Red Hat certifications, for example, you have to know what you're doing in order to pass these certs. It's not an A-B type of thing. No, you have to know what you're doing.
There's not a brain dump somewhere you're going to read, right?
Exactly.
You really have to know. And that's the way certification should be. It should be a validation of knowledge that you have.
A validation, absolutely.
But something you mentioned, Randy, is really important. You talked about business, right? So you study technology and business combined. And when you get to a more senior level of cybersecurity or any technology, really, you have to understand the so what.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one of the things I found as a cybersecurity advisor, and I knew from my, being an officer in the military, I understand to think about the so what. So why are you telling me this? What does it mean?
Yes.
But when you're advising, like I said, we talk to C-suite people. So when you're talking to the CFO or the CIO or the CEO or the COO of a company, and you're telling them they need to make an investment in cybersecurity, they want to know the business why.
Right. No, absolutely.
Right, they do. And it's not our job to explain their business to them, but we have to be able to relate their vulnerability or the threat to their business so that we can help them move forward. And so I do think that knowing a little bit about business does help, because at the end of the day, there's a bottom line. Yeah. And when you study for your more advanced certifications like the CISM or the CISSP, you have to think like the business owner. Oh, you don't think like the techie.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that business owner is going to accept some risk.
Yeah. What's my opportunity cost here?
Right. They're going to accept some risk because it's $1. At the bottom of the day, they want to provide their service, make their product, employ their people.
Yeah. Because we are not a nonprofit, right? Yeah,
right.
And in order for us to grow and be able to hire people, but to your point, there has to be a budget for that. Sure. Absolutely. Because then, if not, to your point with the business case, say, well, if you don't want to pay for it here, you can pay for it whenever you need a $10 million cybersecurity policy rider, where you're paying that over here anyways.
Right.
So.
We're worrying about lawsuits because you're because it was breached.
It's like we had a major breach.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't make those decisions for them, and I pull short of recommendations, but you try to provide them with the facts. There is a so what.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So what? So what if I don't do this, or so what if I do this? And to help them with that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Jody, do you have anything else that you want to talk about from CISA's standpoint? This has been a great conversation, obviously, but if there's anything that maybe I didn't cover that you are pressing to say, or if there's anything else you want to talk about?
I think we covered a lot. I really appreciate the time. Appreciate the platform. I think CISA appreciates the platform.
Yeah.
Feel free. You have a website. You can put my information out there as contact info. Certainly, we'll help anyone as much as we can. There is another cybersecurity advisor in West Virginia. His name is Dave Parsons, and he's going to be based right here out of Morgantown very soon. But we're a regional team. So the one thing I didn't mention earlier is right now I think there are 10 of us on board in Region 3, and we're not bound to our state borders. I work with the gentleman out of Harrisburg a lot, Pennsylvania. So no, we're not bound to our state borders. So there's 2 of us in West Virginia, but that doesn't mean that we can't flex people. So we have 10 in the region. I think we have 4 vacancies, and then our chief position in Philadelphia is they're in the process of selecting that person now. So it's a bigger team. I think our end goal is 14 or 15 in Region 3, and that's a pretty good number.
Yeah.
We can certainly help. And again, there are other advisors out there of a different nature, physical, communications, and then the chemical guys are inspectors. But we're here to help. Everything we do is no cost, no additional cost. You've already paid for our services, and we want to help.
Great.
So reach out to us. It's our
Hopefully
it's our job.
someone's going to be listening to this.
Hopefully
and get the
someone
message
does.
too,
Yeah,
so,
listen. And if it's something I can't do, I'll tell you I can't do.
Yeah,
it.
right.
So
Well, and if
great.
they do have questions, they can ask him on June 20th.
You can ask me on June 20th.
That's right.
Yeah.
Come. It's techyeahconference.com. Again, Jody will be there, and Dave Parsons will be there as well. He's also going to be one of our panelists, which is absolutely awesome. And definitely thanks for driving up this morning.
Yeah, no problem. It's beautiful.
Are you
down
in
with
Huntington?
No, I live in
no.
Hurricane.
Hurricane. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
for those people that listen from out of state, it's Hurricane, not Hurricane.
Not Hurricane.
It's not Hurricane.
Exactly.
Yes.
Make sure you say it right. That's like someone saying it's Louisville.
Yeah.
It's Louisville.
Yeah.
Not Louisville.
Right. So, but I'll be sure to put all the links and everything that was mentioned today in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. Jody, thanks so much again. It was certainly a pleasure to have you, and hopefully everybody in the audience got some valuable information. And again, you can reach out to Jody or Dave. So yeah.
See you in a couple months.
Yep. See you in a couple months. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
absolutely.
Yeehaw! There you go. See, that wasn't too bad.
No, that was
Regular
good.
conversation.